I believe in being honest. I believe in not lying to the press and hyping up the numbers to scare the general public into taking a vaccine that is brand new, that we don't know anything about. I don't think that it was right to coerce staff and to make it look like the hospital was overrun by COVID patients when that was simply not the truth. But my Facebook post had caused them to want to take me off the schedule. But the letter that they handed me, and officially they said I was being taken off the schedule because I was refusing to get the COVID shot. My name's Stephanie Grandy. I'm a registered nurse. I'm wound care certified, and I'm from Asheville, North Carolina. I moved to Maine in November of 2020 with my family when the hospital A.R. Gould offered me a job and asked me to move up here from North Carolina, and offered a relocation bonus to be their wound and ostomy specialist. So we owned a house, a really nice house on the side of a mountain up a private community in North Carolina. We had a crystal clear stream that ran through our backyard. We had no plans to move. And then my husband started having dreams that we moved to Maine. And we're followers of Christ. Anytime the Lord has ever told us to do something, we do it. And so my husband said, we're supposed to move to Maine. And I said, no, I don't. That's too cold. Asheville is in the mountains, and that was about as cold as I like it. And then he said, no, the Lord is telling us in my dreams, because he had so many dreams in a row, that we're supposed to move to Maine. And of course, if the Lord's saying that we have to do something, then we have to do it. I loved it. I thought this is a small hospital. They really care about their patients. I was impressed by the president of the hospital, how he would be visible he was approachable. He's visible in the halls. I noticed that he parks at the back of the parking lot. I just thought he was a very approachable guy. Everybody I worked with was very nice. They treated me wonderfully. The day I was fired, that morning meeting, we had a patient in her 90s who was supposed to go to an assisted living, and the assisted living, they said, was only accepting vaccinated residents. And they wanted to send this lady to that assisted living, but she was refusing the vaccine. She had adamantly refused the vaccine several times, and a case manager RN actually said in morning meeting, and Greg, the president of the hospital, was in the meeting, and so was Dr. Reynolds, and everybody else that listens to morning rounds were listening, and we were talking about her, and the case manager RN said, "Don't worry, we will get that shot in her arm by the end of the day." I actually posted that quote onto Facebook in one of the Stop the Mandate groups, and I was fired that day. And I was fired on a Tuesday, but the previous day, that Monday, I came into work and I had an outpatient come in and said, "I saw on the news where your hospital was overrun by COVID patients in the ED. Is this true? I heard that nurses were walking out and that you guys were overwhelmed." And I didn't know anything about that. And so when I logged in for morning rounds, and Greg, the president of the hospital, said, "I just want everyone to know we did have 8 patients come into the ED that tested positive for COVID, but none of them came in for COVID symptoms, so don't worry, and we only kept 2 of them, and then they were discharging 1 of them. So essentially, we only had 1 of them in the hospital because the other one was being discharged the same day. But that all 8 came in for reasons other than COVID." I had posted on one of the Stop the Mandate Facebook groups that I just wanted to clarify. I didn't say what hospital I worked for. and my Facebook doesn't say what hospital I worked for, and I didn't say which article I was talking about. I just said I saw a news article recently that said that my hospital was overrun by COVID patients. And I just want to say that we weren't, that we did have, when we started testing everyone, we did have 8 patients test positive, but none of them came to our hospital for COVID symptoms. And when I was called into HR and fired, I was told that my Facebook post, I wasn't told which post, but my Facebook post had caused them to want to take me off the schedule. But the letter that they handed me, and officially they said I was being taken off the schedule because I was refusing to get the COVID shot. And they gave me 7 days to take the shot, or I would be officially terminated on August the 31st. Because my husband and I, we had COVID. We caught COVID in the beginning from work. And we recovered, and we have antibodies, and I'm willing to take a test and prove that. I asked in a meeting where Dr. Reynolds and Greg, the president of the hospital, were leading the meeting, and they opened it up for staff to ask questions, and I asked if they were going to be accepting natural immunity or allowing people to test for a titer, which will test for antibodies, and they said no. And I said, why? And then Joseph Siddiqui said, well, you know, normally with other viruses, we would consider natural immunity. There would be antibodies that we could test for, but the CDC has not said that this is a virus that we can test for antibodies and accept that for natural immunity. And I'll actually tell you what I experienced was a dramatic decrease in COVID cases and numbers, or they weren't talked about as much in late October, November, and then all of a sudden, at the end of November, right as the vaccines were becoming available, you heard about a huge increase in cases. And I wonder if that was hyped up because the vaccine was becoming available. So some patients are spillover patients from med-surg, and they are in the ICU, but they're considered med-surg patients. But the COVID positive patients would be considered ICU patients regardless of how sick they were. If they were in the ICU, they were in the category of ICU patients. I started working at the hospital in December of 2020, and I saw no influx or surge of COVID positive patients at the hospital during that time. As a matter of fact, I never saw a huge influx of COVID patients at this hospital the whole entire time I worked there. I would see COVID positive patients. They would be put in the ICU, but it wasn't because they were so sick that they needed to be in the ICU. They were put in the ICU because those rooms were set up for negative pressure, not because those patients were sick enough to need the ICU. And at the most, I would see 1 or 2 patients at a time, and we would go for long stints without a COVID positive patient at all. When the hospital announced that they originally announced that they were going to require the vaccine as soon as one of the vaccines became FDA approved. And then we would have a certain amount of time to be fully vaccinated, or we would be taken off the schedule. They did allow for a medical exemption and a religious exemption. And I submitted a 4-page religious exemption request to them. And actually Tim Dentry, the CEO of Northern Light, emailed me back and said he thanked me for my letter. And Greg, the CEO of A.R. Gould, emailed me back and thanked me for moving here and thanked me for my letter. Well, then the governor, Janet Mills, announced on the 12th of August that she was going to require it of all healthcare workers with no religious exemption accepted. Then I received an email from Joseph Siddiqui in HR that they were not going to accept my religious exemption because of the governor's announcement. And, you know, another thing that may have upset the hospital, too, was that I posted minutes from a meeting on Facebook where where the hospital announced that they were going to be charging approximately $200 per test for unvaccinated staff. Before the governor's announcement, they said, they were going to accept religious and medical exemptions, but they were going to require twice weekly testing of all unvaccinated staff. And in one of the meetings, they announced that it was going to be about $200 per test for employees. And that's about $400 a week. I mean, even though I'm a registered nurse, we haven't been trained on very much information about COVID just in general. We were given lots of trainings on PPE, personal protective equipment, although we weren't provided a whole lot of PPE, and we were made to reuse PPE for a year during COVID. As far as the vaccines, really we know probably as much as the general public about these vaccines because we're not given the education to provide to our own patients, much less, being able to look it up online. All the information has been censored. I only knew if someone was vaccinated if they told me, because as a wound nurse, I don't go digging through everyone's chart. That's just not my business. So I saw a strange, because I'm a wound nurse, I look at everyone's skin. And so I did see strange blood pooling patterns on patients that I had never seen before, where it looked like the blood had leaked out of their capillaries into their skin. These patients had no trauma, so there was no bruise, there was no reason for blood to be leaking out into their tissues. And when I asked providers and other nurses, have you ever seen anything like this? I was just told no. We weren't really allowed to talk about it with other staff. If management heard that we were talking about, are you going to get the vaccine or not, we were told we didn't need to be talking about that during working hours. So it was kind of a hush-hush. I did have some CNAs come up to me and a nurse come up to me and ask me if I was going to get the jab, and I said no. And as far as I know, the people that I talked to have all taken it except for 2 people. I had people tell me there's nowhere else to work here, and the hospital is the largest employer in the region, and I was told that there's nowhere else to work, and so they felt pressured, like they had to be able to provide for their families. I believe in being honest. I believe in not lying to the press and hyping up the numbers to scare the general public into taking a vaccine that is brand new, that we don't know anything about. I don't think that it was right to coerce staff and to make it look like the hospital was overrun by COVID patients when that was simply not the truth. I believe in standing up for what you believe in and what is right. Yeah, I applied for unemployment, and they did an interview with me. The unemployment office did an interview with me and with the hospital, and I have not received, and it's been a month, and I haven't received a decision on that yet. We're kind of waiting on the Lord to tell us what to do next. If the Lord brought us here, He brought us here for a reason. Maybe this is the reason, so that we could stand up and fight against this. So we'll move when He tells us to move.